Honourable members of the committee.
I must inform members that the clerk of the committee can only receive motions for the election of the chair. The clerk cannot receive other types of motions, cannot entertain points of order, nor participate in debate.
We can now proceed to the election of the chair. Pursuant to Standing Order 106.2, the chair must be a member of the official opposition. I am ready to receive motions for the chair. Madam Chair, the former chair of the committee did an excellent work, and I would like to nominate Karen Vecchio.
That Ms. Vecchio be elected as chair of the committee. Are there any further motions? Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion? Very good. I declare the motion carried and Ms. Vecchio duly elected as chair. Thank you, Bethany.
Computer. Well, I would like to begin by saying welcome and thank you to everybody for having the confidence in me in this 44th Parliament to lead you through the Status of Women Committee. I am truly excited to look at the faces around this table and recognize the diversity of opinions, diversity of where we are from, and what we can all bring to the table in such important discussions when we're talking about women and gender equality. So thank you, and thank you to all. I know that Stephanie, I don't believe you're here with all of us all the time, but our clerk, Stephanie, I'm just going to start. I do not know if anyone knows, are we supposed to introduce them, or is this in these motions? In the motions. Oh, they're in the motions. Well, these are our friends, Dominique and Claire, who will also be working with us throughout the entire Parliament. And I do believe that we only have Stephanie for one day, so let's make her work hard. So we're going to continue with today's meeting with the election of vice chairs. If the committee is in agreement, I invite the clerk to proceed over the election of the vice chairs. Everybody's good? Okay, clerk, passing it to you.
Conformément à l'article.
Pursuant to Standing Order 106.2, the first vice chair must be a member of the government party. I am now prepared to receive motions for the first vice chair.
The motions for the first vice chair. Madame Lampropoulos.
Sidhu as vice chair.
It has been moved by Madame Lampropoulos that Ms. Sidhu be elected as first vice chair of the committee. Are there any further motions? Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion? I declare the motion carried and Ms. Sidhu duly elected as vice chair. Conformément.
Pursuant to Standing Order 106.2, the second vice chair must be a member of an opposition party other than the official opposition. I am now prepared to receive motions for the second vice chair.
The motions for the second vice chair. Monsieur Serret.
Mr. Serrier. Madam Chair, Madam Clerk, I would like to nominate Andréane Larouche as second vice chair. It was proposed it has been moved by Mr. Serré that Madame Andréane Larouche be elected as second vice chair of the committee. Are there any further motions?
To adopt the motion. I declare the motion carried and Madame Larouche duly elected chair, second vice chair of the committee.
So welcome to the meeting number 1 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on the Status of Women. I'm just going to note, they always make these lovely notes for me all the time, but I usually do go off script, so I'm going to start where I always start. Congratulations to the newly elected vice chairs. I really look forward to working with you both when we sit on subcommittee. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Regarding the speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do the best we can do to maintain a consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether participating virtually or in person. And as we note today, everybody is in person for this meeting. I would like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that the screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. The proceeding will be made available via the House of Commons website. Given the ongoing pandemic situation and in light of the recommendations from public health authorities, as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on October 19, 2021, to remain healthy and safe, the following is recommended for all of these meetings when attending in person. Anyone with symptoms should participate by Zoom and not attend the meeting in person. Everyone must maintain 2-meter physical distancing, whether seated or standing. Everyone must wear a non-medical mask when circulating in the room. It is recommended in the strongest possible terms that members wear their masks at all times, including when seated. Non-medical masks, which provide better clarity over cloth masks, are available in the room. Everyone present must maintain proper hand hygiene by using the hand sanitizer at the room entrance. Committee rooms are cleaned before and after each meeting. To maintain this, everyone is encouraged to clean surfaces such as the desk, chair, and microphone with the provided disinfectant wipes when vacating or taking a seat. As the chair, I will be enforcing these measures for the duration of the meeting, and I thank members in advance for their cooperation. So for everybody knowing that I'm a meanie bobini, you'd better keep your masks on, okay? So I'll remind that to all of the members' assistants as well, just to ensure that we're all on the same page. I would like to now suggest that as the next order of business, that the committee now proceed to considering our routine motions. In preparation for this, the committee clerk has circulated a list of routine motions that the committees adopted in the last parliamentary session. The committee clerk can also answer any questions about the routine motions that you may have. Election of vice. Okay, golly gee, I have 3 copies of this. So let me just flip it over here. Note for chair, ask committee if you would you like to continue with the routine motions today? Okay, I'm looking at the time, recognizing today is a very important day as well. We do have a fiscal update at 4 o'clock. So perhaps I'm looking at everybody. Is everybody in the same thought as let's get this work done? Okay, let's get to business. Okay, so is it? If easier to consider the routine motions one by one. What's that? Continue by moving the motions. Okay, someone should be moving the motions. Okay, Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess, Madam Chair, I'll just read one paragraph at a time, and then we could vote, or do I read the whole page? What's the best process? This depends.
If we have a choice, we can either go through one at a time or we can do them as a whole. I do need an agreement on which way we'd want to go. It would have to be unanimous. So would we like to go order by order, or do we want to do them as a block? Yes, go ahead, Leah.
Madam Chair, so, I'm okay with it, but there are a couple of motions that I'd like to propose amendments to.
Fantastic. Okay, so
Thank
Mark,
you.
we're going to go one by one, so I'll start off with you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So the first, I'll read it in English. The first, that the committee retain as needed and at the discretion of the chair the services of one or more analysis from the Library of Parliament to assist in its work. All in agreement?
All in agreement? Passed. Motion passed.
Le deuxième, que le...
Second motion, that the subcommittee on agenda and procedure be established and be composed of 5 members, the chair, 1 member of each recognized party, and that the subcommittee work in a spirit of collaboration.
All in agreement? Motion carries.
Okay, the next one, that the chair be authorized to hold meetings to receive evidence and to have that evidence published when a quorum is not present, including 2 members of the opposition parties, 2 members of the governing party, but when traveling outside the parliamentary precinct, that the meeting begin after 15 minutes, regardless of members present.
Any questions or comments? Okay, are we all in favor? Motion carried.
That 5 minutes, that the witnesses be given 5 minutes for their opening statement, that whenever possible, the witnesses provide the committee with their opening statement 72 hours in advance, and that at the discretion of the chair, during the questioning of witnesses, there will be allocated 6 minutes for the first questioner of each party as follows for the first round: Conservative Party, Liberal Party, Bloc Québécois, New Democratic Party. For the second and subsequent rounds, the order and time for questioning be as follows: Conservative Party, 5 minutes. Liberal Party, 5 minutes. Bloc Québécois, 2.5 minutes. New Democratic Party, 2.5 minutes. Conservative Party, 5 minutes. Liberal Party, 5 minutes.
Go ahead, Leah.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. I'd like to propose an amendment, an addition that it would read, in addition, that each party represented on the committee be entitled to select one witness per 2-hour witness panel. And, I think, the rationale for that is I think it's really important to listen to a diverse group of witnesses. I think it's vital to committee work, specifically on this committee. I think it also reflects the proportional makeup of the House in the committee. And that I think it's important that we move to ensure that each recognized party gets 1/4 of the witnesses, which would ensure a more diverse group of witnesses. And I think looking around the table, I think, that is really critical to this group. And in the last Parliament, this rotation was put in place through an opposition motion sponsored by Michelle Rampel-Gardner, which instructed the Health Committee to study COVID-19. This worked very well and can be a model for other committees. So I'd just like to put that on the table.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Anita, you have a comment?
Yeah, no, I think, it's been a few years since I was on this committee, but I do recall that we were very good at sometimes working on a consensus basis, and often in this area, the witnesses proposed by different parties are the same witnesses. So I don't want to constrict us in that kind of a way. I think that we've all worked very well collaboratively, and I do think if worse comes to worse, we have traditions in this place about how that is done, but I certainly don't want us to be constrained by emotion when in fact, we may all agree.
Any other comments? Okay, Leah?
I just want to honor that good faith suggestion, but I do think that there's a reason why you have procedures and policies in committee, and so I would like to push it a little bit and still request the following amendment, that each party represented on the committee be entitled to select one witness per 2-hour witness panel.
Fair enough. I'm just going to maybe give some background to anyone who hasn't been stuck with me as chair before, just to let you know. Oh, sorry. I've got a whole bunch of things happening here. What I usually do and what I've done in the past is I've granted, if they put your witnesses based on the proportional, if we were 25% each and you put in 25, I always believe it's up to those parties to put through those witness names based on the number that they've been allocated, that I do not mess with those lists, that is who you wish to see as one of those members. So we have done it in the past based on proportional, based on the representation taken from the House of Commons. And as I've said, I've always guaranteed that I would not mess around with your lists. I don't think that is the option of the chair because I do believe the diversity of opinion is exactly what we need at that. Is there any other discussions or concerns on this before we go forward? Okay. Would everybody like to see the amendment to this motion? A vote? I would like to see. Okay. Should we do recorded or just recorded vote, if that's okay, on this motion?
Ms. Lambropoulos.
Against.
Monsieur Sarré.
No.
Ms. Sidhu.
Against.
Ms. Suds.
Against.
Ms. Vandenbeld.
Against.
Ms. Ferrari.
Against.
Ms. Goodridge.
Against.
Ms. Vian.
Contre.
Madame Larouche.
Pour.
Ms. Gazan.
For.
Eight nays, 2 yeas.
Okay. The amendment to the motion has been defeated. Are there any other amendments? On to the main motion. All those in favor of the main motion that was put forward by Mark Saray? All those in favor? Passed. Okay, Mr. Saray, continue.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. À la deuxième page, document distribution, that only the clerk of the committee be authorized to distribute documents to members of the committee, provided that documents are in both official languages and the witnesses be advised accordingly.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes. Go ahead.
Le rapport de travail que le graphique
That the clerk of the committee, at the discretion of the chair, be authorized to make the necessary arrangements to provide working meals for the committee and its subcommittees, which is important. Tous ceux qui sont d'accord? Tous ceux qui sont pour? Madame Speaker.
Okay. We, Madame Laroche, did you hear the last motion? Oui? Excellent. Mark, can you just say that last motion so that we have a lot on the record, please?
que la greffière du comité, en consultation
That the clerk of the committee, at the discretion of the chair, be authorized to make the necessary arrangements to provide working meals for the committee and its subcommittees.
Seeing none, motion, all those in favor? Fantastic. That motion passes. Go.
Excellent. That if requested, reasonable travel accommodation and living expenses be reimbursed to witnesses not exceeding 2 representatives per organization, and that in exceptional circumstances, payment for more representatives be made at the discretion of the chair.
Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Happy, joyful. Moving forward. Next one. We're back to happiness.
Accès aux réunions à huis clos.
Access to in-camera meetings, that unless otherwise ordered, each committee member be allowed to be accompanied by one staff member at in-camera meetings, and that one additional person from each House officer's office be allowed to be present.
Is there comments? Leah, go ahead.
I don't mean to kill your happy, but I do
It's all
want to
good.
offer an amendment. Just to change to the following, that the committee may meet in camera only for the following purpose: to consider a draft report, B, to attend briefings concerning national security, C, to consider lists of witnesses, D, for any other reason with the unanimous consent of the committee, and that votes be taken in camera with the exception of votes regarding the consideration of draft reports and be recorded in minutes of proceedings, including how each member voted when the recorded votes are requested. And the rationale for this, of course, is that, as we've seen in previous parliaments where the government has tried to move committee meetings in camera to force difficult issues and votes behind closed doors and to avoid public scrutiny, I think the public has a right to know what we are doing in these meetings, that even in minority parliaments where the government can't act unilaterally, there were times where this was attempted. And as a consequence, valuable committee time ended up being wasted in debating this. So that's the second reason. 3, for the reason that there is value to set out parameters at the front end of routine motions that specify when in-camera meetings can take place. So, for the purposes of clarity. And otherwise, we may be in a situation where the work of the committee can be wasted in debating, different attempts to have things put in camera. It's a big waste of time. So I'd like to put forward that amendment. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm just going to make one note that was brought to me by the clerk, and that's just to inform you that when it comes to this, of course, anything that is done in camera, of course, it remains confidential at all times. The voting record and how you voted would be the only thing that would be available. Correct, clerk? Correct. Okay. Any other further discussion on this? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? Okay, can I have a vote on that? Okay, recorded vote, please. May we have a recorded vote, Matt, clerk? Yeah, I'm just... Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
Could I ask you just to repeat the beginning of the motion? Sorry, I couldn't hear.
Okay, sorry. That the committee may meet in camera only for the following purposes: A, to consider a draft report; B, to attend briefings concerning national security; C, to consider lists of witnesses; D, for any other reason with unanimous consent of the committee; that all votes taken in camera, with the exception of votes regarding the consideration of draft reports, be recorded in the minutes of proceedings, including how each member voted when recorded votes are requested; that any motion to sit in camera is debatable and amendable.
We're going to do a recorded vote. If there's no questions or comments on that, we're good? Second portion, you added the second line to that, that any motion to sit in camera is debatable and amendable. That is actually out of order and procedure.
Okay.
Is there a retraction of that? Would she be able to retract that? Motion is out of order with that line specifically. Go ahead, Leanne.
Can I please amend then my motion to include everything but the last sentence?
Through a brand new motion?
Yes,
and just subtract that line.
Okay.
Yeah, just start from scratch.
I know
and subtract
everybody's
it.
anxious. My apologies,
No, it's all
everybody.
happy. It's real
okay.
good.
We'll try it again. That the committee may meet in camera only for the following purposes: A, to consider a draft report; B, to attend briefings concerning national security; C, to consider lists of witnesses; D, for any other reason with unanimous consent of the committee; that all votes taken in camera, with the exception of the votes regarding the consideration of draft reports, be recorded in the minutes of proceedings, including how each member voted when recorded votes are requested.
Thank you very much. And we'll go on to a recorded vote. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Lambropoulos,
Against.
Monsieur Sarré,
Contre.
Ms. Sidhu,
Against.
Ms. Suds,
Against.
Ms. Vandenveld,
Against.
Ms. Ferreri,
Against.
Ms. Goodridge,
Against.
Madame Vian,
Contre.
Madame Larouche,
Contre.
Ms. Gazan.
For.
Thank you very much. And if we could do the main the main motion, all those in favor of the main motion? A bigger show of hands because okay, fantastic. That motion has passed. Okay, and carry on, Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Transcripts. That one copy of the transcript of each in-camera meeting be kept in the committee clerk's office for consultation by members of the committee or by their staff, and that the analyst, that's the English word I can't say, analyst assigned to the committee also have access to the camera transcripts.
Mark, don't worry. I can't speak English either, and that's my first language, so it's all good.
Analyst.
The word is analyst, as Leila has spoken out. Are there any questions or comments on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Just a little bit. Yeah, happy that I can read that one. Fantastic. That motion passes. And I believe if we turn to the back of the page.
Troisième page, avis de motion.
Notice of motion that a 40-hour notice interpreted as 2 nights be required for any substantive motion to be moved in committee, unless the substantive motion relates directly to business, then under consideration, provided that A, the motion be filed with the clerk of the committee no later than 4 p.m. from Monday to Friday; B, the motion be distributed to members and the offices of the whips of each recognized party in both official languages by the clerk of on the same day the said notice was transmitted, if it was received no later than the deadline hour. C, notices received after the deadline hour or on non-business days be deemed to have been received during the next business day. And that when the committee is holding meetings outside the parliamentary precinct, no substantive motion may be moved. Merci.
On that motion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Fantastic. Motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. that in relation to orders of reference from the House respecting bills, A, the clerk of the committee shall, upon the committee receiving such an order of reference, write to each member who is not member of the caucus representing on the committee to invite those members to file with the clerk of the committee in both official languages any amendments to the bill, which is the subject of the said order, which they would suggest the committee consider. B, suggested amendments filed pursuant to paragraph A at least 48 hours prior to the start of clause-by-clause consideration of the bill to which the amendments relate shall be deemed to be proposed during the said consideration, provided that committee may, by motion, vary the deadline in respect of a given bill, and C, during the clause-by-clause consideration of the bill, the chair shall allow a member who filled suggested amendments pursuant to paragraph A an opportunity to make brief representation to support them.
Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Fantastic, passes. Next motion, Mark.
Page. Que la greffière informe chaque
Technical test for witness, that the clerk inform each witness who is to appear before the committee that the House Administration Support Team must conduct technical tests to check the connectivity and equipment used to ensure the best possible sound quality, and that the chair advise the committee at the start of each meeting of any witness who did not perform the required technical tests.
Is there comments on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes. Finally.
And the last one here on the page, Madam Chair, that all documents submitted for committee business that do not come from a federal department, members' offices, or that have not been translated by the Translation Bureau be sent for prior linguistic review by the Translation Bureau before being distributed to all members.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Fantastic, motion passes. Okay, after considering all routine motions, does the committee wish to discuss any future business at this time? Go ahead.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, I would like to table 3 motions. They have been translated so that we can discuss them in committee. I think you are very... the interpreter doesn't have the motion.
Concernant.
The committee...
Is the motion in both French and English, and have you provided
Je peux en faire la lecture aussi après en anglais, ou laisser la feuille pour...
La translation, does she have a copy for the person at the translation booth?
Nous ferons suivre évidemment la traduction en...
Well, we will, of course, send it up to the members of the committee, but I could read it here in the House, both in French and in English, so that the motions are tabled.
Just wanted to let you know that I also have 2 motions to present for consideration. I've translated them and have enough for everybody around the table.
Mark, did you have something?
Non, aussi pour être traduite, pour pouvoir disposer autour de la table. Donc, j'aimerais être reconnue et faire la lecture de mes...
I'd like to be recognized to read my motions as they've been translated.
I'm just seeing this one moment. Take the motions now?
Sont déjà envoyés par courriel.
Merci. I just wanted to verify it because, as we know, it is as the committee wishes for motions to be read. And Andriana, I'd be happy for you to be able to read those into the. But I do also want to take into consideration the debate and the fact that the fiscal update is coming at 4. So I'm just going to look at everybody and say I don't know if your motions are long, but what we can do today is we can read them into the record so that they have been read into the record, and we can also take the opportunity for Emanuela to do that. And then after that, we would allow the debate to be on at our next business meeting. We would then discuss it then, but not make a decision for today on how we proceed. Is that okay with you, Adrienne?
C'est exactement, je comprends.
That's exactly, yes, what was going to do. So, yes, it would have been notice of motions today for study.
I will allow Adrienne to put hers forward, followed by Emanuela, and those will be read into the record. And then following that, there will be no debate. We will open debate at our next meeting. Okay, go ahead. You have the floor.
Donc, je vais faire la lecture.
So I will be reading my motion. Thank you for members of the committee. I'll do that quickly so that we can all attend the economic update. That pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study on the various legislative experiences of states and countries that have created legislation to criminalize coercive and manipulative behavior, and on any other public policy tools and measures to address psychological and family violence. That the committee dedicate at least 5 meetings to this issue and report its findings and recommendations to the House.
Motion numéro 2.
Motion number 2. That, pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study on how women's participation in politics is affected by the political party funding model. That the committee dedicate at least 4 meetings to this issue and report its findings and recommendations to the House. And my last motion, to be tabled today, that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study on honor crimes as a type of family violence to better understand the violence perpetrated by family members against girls and women while following traditional codes of honor, and that the study include A, the phenomenon of honor crimes, B, the federal legislation that prevents or limits this type of violence, and C, best practices for preventing this violence and protecting vulnerable people from it. That the committee dedicate at least 5 meetings to this issue and report its findings and recommendations to the House. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm looking forward to being able to debate these motions after the holiday break.
Yes, thank you. So the first one is that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study examining the factors contributing to mental health issues experienced by young women and girls, including but not limited to eating disorders, addiction, depression, anxiety, and suicide. That the committee provide attention to the impact of online harms and issues regarding self-esteem in young women and girls. That the committee hear from witnesses and departmental officials for no less than 6 meetings. That the committee consider ways in which the Government of Canada can continue to strengthen mental health supports for young women and girls and report its findings to the House, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the government...
Madame la Présidente, j'entends...
Madam Chair, I can hear from the interpreters that Lamropoulos was speaking too quickly and that the motion has not been provided to the interpreters.
I've submitted my...
We'll get the motion to them. We'll get this done. Not a problem. Thank you very much, Andriane, for informing us. And Emanuela, you have the same disease I have. We speak too fast. Okay? Our brain is going.
Just trying to get us to the full economic statement a little
Thank
quicker,
you.
but I'll take my time.
Awesome. Everybody's got their work? Excellent. Carry on.
Pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study examining the factors contributing to mental health issues experienced by young women.
Adrienne?
J'ai pas de traduction.
No.
Sorry, I didn't have interpretation. The interpreter notes that the microphone was off. Apologies.
The mic. Okay, we're good. Andriane, do you need it from the beginning? Okay, commence.
That pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study examining the factors contributing to mental health issues experienced by young women and girls, including but not limited to eating disorders, addiction, depression, anxiety, and suicide. That the committee provide attention to the impact of online harms and issues regarding self-esteem in young women and girls. That the committee hear from witnesses and departmental officials for no less than 6 meetings. That the committee consider ways in which the Government of Canada can continue to strengthen mental health supports for young women and girls and report its findings to the House. And that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the government table a response thereto. There are 2 of them.
There are 2 motions. Yeah. Okay.
And the second
motion.
I'll go in French this time.
that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study examining the factors contributing to mental health issues experienced by young women and girls. That the committee examine the current support infrastructure for also protecting young women and girls who are in dangerous environments. That the committee examine other ways in which the Government of Canada can contribute to preventing domestic violence and to protecting women and children who are fleeing violence. That the committee hear witnesses for at least 6 meetings, and that the committee report its findings to the House, and that, pursuant to Standing Order 109, the government table a response thereto.
Or do I? No? Okay. Mark, did you have your hand?
Just wanted, Madam Chair, if there are other motions to bring it to a subcommittee, later on you could...
Well, what we can do is, as everybody knows, we now have other opportunities as well. There's e-notices, putting your motion directly to the clerk. There's lots of opportunities for us to do that. I would say that the motions that we've heard today are really exciting and is going to set a great foundation as we're moving forward in these studies. Since we are not going to be debating this at this time, what I'd like to do is adjourn them. I'm not adjourning it yet. What I'd like to do is adjourn this meeting so that we can carry on, and then we'll reconvene these discussions at our next meeting. I'm just looking. Okay, so today's meeting is adjourned. That's my. What's that?